T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Seed Collectors. I am very stoked for a special episode, and we are kicking it off today with Mr. James Loud. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, man, it's absolutely my pleasure. I'm glad we were able to do this because you have been somebody that myself and a lot of us in the community have been looking up to and have been learning from for, many years, specifically the last few years. You have your own show every Sunday now. You talk to people. Well, let me have you explain the show, please.
Yeah, so, I guess we started out during COVID. I was bored, and I'm a person, I like staying busy, and Peter from the Future Cannabis Project proposed that I do a show or film an episode. The episode turned into the James Loud Show, and I think that's where I do. And that kind of, I think there was 42 episodes that we did, something like that, over the period of a year and something. And then I wanted to get my own studio, and it literally took me 2 years to get the studio that I wanted. And I really focused on breeding with my first podcast. And it was more of a longer format. So my new show is a shorter format. We started out with 30 minutes. It kind of gone to an hour, hour and 15, and sometimes an hour and a half, depending on the guest. But I try to get interesting guests from all over the world. We have Marlon Ash as a staple. He's a good friend of mine. He's been on a bunch of episodes, but we just interviewed Steve D'Angelo and First Mon, who's from Jamaica. They have a retreat together, and we have professional plant rollers. We have a little bit of everything, and also breeders. I love cannabis. I love breeding. I love talking about breeding. I can talk your ear off about plants and genetics. And I got a book coming out. Should be out by, this is the first announcement really of it officially coming out, hopefully by Thanksgiving. We'll do the real, true official announcement in a couple weeks, but so far it's looking like we're going to hit the target for the holidays.
That'll be wicked. Take my money now, because I'm signing up for that book. So that's exciting news. So yeah, people can go back and catch some of the past episodes. Is it just James Loud on YouTube?
James Loud Podcast. We do the James Loud Podcast. It's been a fun adventure. This whole thing, podcast, I really enjoy the process. I enjoy meeting new people too, and also highlighting my friends, people I've met. We got to get you on a podcast down here in the Bay Area. I'd love to come share. We got a beautiful studio. We got hats on the wall from guests. It's just a fun experience, and it's part of the whole. I feel like also being able to get ideas from other people, what they like, what they don't like. I'm always testing new products on different people, new flavors, trying to get up in Washington in a couple weeks. They're doing a pheno hunt, and I'm invited to go check it out. So I'm really interested in how that goes.
Nice. Well, getting to the genetic side, because you've done a lot of educating about it, but you're definitely not new to this. I mean, we can look back in history, even past 10 years ago. You've been doing this for a long time. But 2012, you won the High Times Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam. And you weren't done there. You decided to win it again in 2013 and then again in 2014. But what was that moment like in 2012 being called up onto the stage for your genetics? And maybe what were the genetics that you won with and why did you choose those?
Yeah, so that's a real interesting story. So I was in the mindset, and my partners in the time, I was in the mindset that High Times was rigged because I'd lost in Seattle and I'd lost in a couple other places. Entered, and we were going there and we are going to have fun, and I entered the best stuff that I had, and it was Loud Scout, which was Platinum Kush, which is the Platinum OG times the Girl Scout cookies. And it wasn't the form cut; it was the original Girl Scout. Chunky nugs. It had and the thing is like what you learn from growing is as stuff ages, as far as sexual maturity, stuff changes from the first one when you're doing a seed run through the first phylella, or not the first phylella generation, but the first clonal generation to the next clonal generation. So usually you should run things a few times for it to really stabilize, so that expression stabilized. Well, this was a seed run, and we've never got anything quite like it again. There was bananas that we were picking off the entries, and some, but it's really interesting because we didn't think we were going to win, and to get called up on stage when you don't think. The truth is I had heard a rumor that Cookies won, and Cali Connection also entered Cookies, and they were all standing by the stage. And so when we're a little company, we had a 10 by 10 booth. They had a big 20-foot tall, 50-foot long booth with a mega, and they put on a big show and they spent a lot of money. We just went there and we're selling clothes, and ended up winning the cup.
Wow.
Really surreal. It kind of put us on a path. I met a lot of good friends from that experience that I'm friends with today. Soma's one from around then, and then a bunch of others. You saw Soma next year when you went there.
Yeah, and Soma is known for the New York City Diesel, amongst many other things, but that's one that pops to mind immediately. Always a lot of talk of Diesel. Now again, you have the background, the experience to work with some of these older strains. What have been like two of your favorite to actually grow or work with as a breeder?
Working with, it has terps and it tastes good. I love it, especially. I don't really care about the structure as much. Skittles is a great, amazing candy terp, but I like some far out stuff like Texas Shoreline, which has this very green, vegetative kind of smell. It has a real good funk to it, and I love it. I love the effect from it. Texas Shoreline's friggin' one of my newer favorites. I just recently got to work with it. With the banana Skittles. I crossed the shoreline with the banana Skittles, the grape gas, my double lemon cherry, and the Skittles BX, the ZBX that I made. And so, I mean, I would say recently the shoreline, the Fort Collins Cough, I did those in my backyard last year. And growing those in my backyard, it was a really interesting experience because I hadn't grown a lot of plants in my backyard for a while, for probably like 8 years maybe, where I put a lot of plants in my backyard, and I had 80 plants in my backyard. But I got a lot of seeds out of it. I did a seed crop. It was real interesting. And then I worked with a lot of, I had Chem 91 back there and a bunch of other old school things. And so I'm working on a lot of stuff where we're taking old school genetics and combining them with new school. So it's a lot of fun. I think what people don't understand is the seed. I mean, some of you guys, of course, some of the guys watching this show totally understand, but I think a lot of people think breeding is seed production, and the real breeding work comes from phenotype. End of the day, you're going through rooms, you're smelling, and you're isolating specific traits that you like, and you're either breeding them in or you're at least capturing that phenotype and then having a clone of it to where you can either breed with it or you can monetize it or at least have that clone available. So I think work is really done in the grow room and not done in the seed production room where you're doing this. Because anybody can really make seeds. It's not hard. I got a book on it. Pretty much says everything on making seeds, but there's something for putting in the work and also getting your hands dirty. And the thing is like I go on my show, I talk about data points a lot. The data points is one of the most important things. The more data points you have over time, the more you're going to understand things. And that's just, it goes across the board in life, but especially with cannabis, the more plants you've seen that are different, the more data points you have to where you're like, okay, well, I recognize this, I see this. Hoplite and virate. Most people that work with a lot, you can tell just by looking at a plant if it potentially has hoplite and virate. You know, and there's all these little things that you learn from getting your hands dirty and working with the plants. So that's why I think cultivation should be a big part of your foundational aspect. If you want to be a breeder someday, learn how to grow really good. The other thing with that is being able to differentiate expressions. If you don't grow well enough, if you don't grow really good, you'll be able to tell the difference between this phenotype and this phenotype and this phenotype. I mean, it's a tricky thing, and it takes a lot of learning. And I'm lucky enough to have worked with some really amazing growers along the way, and other breeders as well. And you know, learning from them, and I feel like we've all contributed to each other, sharing genetics, but also just sharing knowledge. And that's kind of my book that's coming out. It's about sharing knowledge. I feel like I'm one of those people that doesn't hold a lot of, as far as like secrets for methodology and everything. You know, I feel like I like sharing. I like sharing information. I share pretty much everything. You know, and the book reflects that. And I think that's why it's going to be a special book. There's nobody else that's had a book out in the last 25 years. Greg Green's book was the last one out.
This book right here. Oh, you can't see it. There we go. The Cannabis Breeder Bible. Anyways, it's behind the screen there. Woo. Yeah, you know, I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, you know, you are definitely a very open person with the information, which is why I think a lot of us have gravitated to you. And it gives a lot of people confidence in your genetics because you are very transparent. But like you said, the work is really done in the selection. And you have to grow it well to select right. So you can give away some of the, you know, the secrets that people protect sometimes, but you still have to be able to make the selections. You still have to be able to grow it well. And that's an important thing. And I also like too, for, you know, people, you know, watching this show, they're kind of new to genetics maybe, or collecting seeds. I always say, and you echoed it too, is, you know, you have to run a plant a few times before you really know if it's something you want to work with or a keeper. So avoid just getting a male and a female from the same pack than just starting and going at it.
No, and I think that the thing is here's another great tip is like when you're selecting males, you don't necessarily know what that male is going to do. And just assuming that you can pick the best male out of a group, it's really difficult to do with regular breeding, and anybody can make seeds. You can, and I actually think everybody should make seeds, but I think having a real defined approach helps. Understanding what you're looking for, and it's really what the offspring does. It's not that male as much as what it passes on to the progeny. It's super important, and you know you can really test that by taking one male and putting it on several different things, and then seeing what traits it passes on. I mean, that's one approach, but also just growing out the progeny and then going, yeah, that's a good male. I'm glad I kept it alive, or pollen of it alive. Yeah. For other things.
Yeah, keeping the males alive is important. But there's also, you know, the feminized seeds, which I know you work a lot with. And, you know, I definitely want to bring some of your genetics into the conversation. So you kind of mentioned one of these earlier. This is your BLZ, which is the Busta Limes times the ZBX. So that's the Skittles back cross.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I don't even think we haven't even released it. That's totally unreleased. You have so Busta Limes is a Black Lime Reserve cross that it was made by Jason Hutto at House of Cultivar, which him and I are business partners. We've done a lot of breeding projects together. He's mentioned in my book. He's amazing. As far as when it comes to pheno hunting, that dude knows what's up. You know, and it's all have our strengths and weaknesses, and he is pretty well rounded when it comes to most things. And that Busta Limes is like It's like the black lime it's like a black lime Skittles almost. And it's got super candy lime terps that reminds me of, and you kind of get a little Sprite with Skittles anyway. But then that with the Skittles ZBX, you're going to get some limey Skittles and lime candy and a lot of good characteristics. And I think one of the things that Jason does that's really special that not a lot of people can afford to do is with that busted limes, for example, when he's doing the selection, he's testing it in the same environment that he would actually cultivate in. So he's doing selections for his, it's like, it's one thing doing selections for other people's environments that aren't exactly the same, but he's doing it for the exact same environment. So he's able to look at firsthand the kind of results he's going to get, especially for commercial viability. So you look, is it going to yield well? I mean, stuff that as a home grower, it doesn't matter as much, but as a breeder who's breeding for scale, for other people that are buying stuff at scale, who are licensing genetics, you want to know the commercial viability of a genetic. Obviously you want it to smell amazing, look amazing, taste amazing, have amazing effect, all these things, but also there's that commercial viability aspect of it. And so we're doing a lot of that. And also now I'm breeding with a lot of tissue culture genetics. I work with Justin Gibbons from Apical Biotech, and we're doing some crazy stuff as far as breeding from tissue culture, pathogen indexed plants that are truly clean. So we're not going to viruses or viruses.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, because I mean that's the real deal, professional breeding, which is why I wanted to lead, the new show off with you, because you have a wide variety of offerings. You can pretty much hit, all of the flavor palettes out there. But I also wanted to get across to people that, there's people beyond Instagram who are breeding and making seeds, and they put a lot of time and effort into it. And what you get back from that is, again, a lot of people, myself, we started with bag seed. You grow that, you think it's pretty good, you're happy, and then you get what I call pro breeder seeds, and you're like, night and day difference. And that's another thing that I think you and the James Lau Genetics offers over kind of the plethora of things out there. So I wanted to ask you, maybe what are a couple of the things that you currently have that you're excited about, or maybe some things upcoming you could tell people about. And I'd love to hear about, which plants you used in it and why you used it in there, because everybody loves their selection history.
So I made 300 outcrosses last year.
I just spit on my computer. Wow.
Yeah, 300 different crosses, and we're slowly releasing stuff as it gets tested. And we do testing through multiple generations typically before we release it. Not always, but I definitely grow it out one time before we release stuff. And so, even stuff with intersex traits, if I think it's that amazing that it deserves to be on the website and we have some herms, I'm still, I'm taking after Mike from Exotic, that some of the best stuff is still going to have intersex traits. And as long as you make your customers aware of it, I don't think it's a problem. Stable genetic. I like stabilizing autoflowers. I think if anybody watches the Dude Grows podcast or his channel, he had the black gelato, and that black gelato is something pretty special. It's no genetics. They're black. What is that black one? The blackest of the black, and it has the color. And so I have the gelato auto that's been bred into, now we're going on F6. I basically crossed it to, what is their strain? It's not the Anvil, it's the Blackstrap. And so that Blackstrap, it's amazing. So that Blackstrap has color. The entire progeny reflects color, and that's something you can do through a couple generations. But I'm using that to get the terps that I like in my gelato into the color that I like. And so we have the mix of both. Dude Gross had it on his show, and I think he had problems with mold in it. But as far as I'm super excited about that, because it's an auto that has a really vibrant color. It also has amazing terps and really good structure, and terpene profile is really heavy in the gelato biscotti kind of realm. You get a lot of those, candy gas flavors that hints on musky, like from the sherbet. And then as far as the Zauer Diesel is one of the ones that got me super excited, and we're actually going through. We've narrowed it down I think there was 25 seeds originally popped of it to see kind of what happened, because it's a longer flowering variety with the weasel's diesel. And then on the sour, it's funny, the ones that lean sour are definitely the longer flowering ones that are like 10 to 12 weeks and get massive buds this big. You know,
Nice.
yeah, the bracts just stack. So we can't say calyx anymore because calyx is the incorrect term. It's really the bract.
Bract and stigma, yes.
Yeah, that's the correct terminology. But it's funny. So you have these really longer flowering expressions, and we sell seeds of this on our website too. But the longer flowering expressions, they stack, and they are fat, and they are huge. And then the Skittles, if you see the stuff that's really skittly, it's frail in comparison to the.
Mhm.
I use the Weasel Sour Diesel, and I got a cut from my friend Ruben of the Weasel's Diesel, and it's not the East Coast like I remember. It's a sour. It's definitely sour and greasy, a really greasy plant, but it's not the ECSD that I grew up with. It's a little bit different, but still working with the sour, I was really happy with it, and I'm happy with the progeny. And then the ZBX is the Skittles to the Gelato 41 back to the Skittles. That is an interesting one because I feel like it's a Skittles with improved structure. So you get, and it's not that.
Nice.
So I like the fact that it's candy and it still has, with that Gelato 41, you're getting a lot of those interesting terps as well. You do get a little bit of color with some of the stuff. So you'll find color in some of the expressions, but you'll find fat stacked plants. And really what we were looking for, we culled all the ones that were really, Jason actually culled the long flowering ones. And I think I'm going back up there in a couple weeks to look at the next round, but like it was narrowed down to, I think, five or seven. And I'm excited to see what they look like on the second run. Should be exciting. So you're getting candy and gas, so you can't go wrong.
No, definitely popular profiles here. And you mentioned your gelato. I've got your strawberry guava gelato auto here, which is going to be used actually with the Dew Grows. They do their grow dots. So I'm going to do a test here with a couple of water only methods and some autos. So that'll be popping in there as well. Now, what are a couple of plants that you've grown or seeds that you've popped maybe from other breeders? I know it's hard when you make 300 outcrosses to run somebody else's gear. But have you run anybody else's gear, and maybe why did you choose it?
Dude, I've read so many other people's gear. You know, it's like guys like Mean Gene do an amazing job. I love his stuff. I got a cut of the pink champagne through a friend of a friend, through his sister actually, and my guy who worked for me, his name is Joe, and they were in contact, and he got me this champagne cut, and it's pink champagne's fire. If you ever have a chance to run it, it's super old school and amazing. But as far as popping seeds, when we're talking about popping seeds, let's go to discuss aficionado. So I have a great story back in the day, 2000, not even that far, but 2018, T.H. Caesar gave me a bunch of seeds, like literally a huge bag of seeds. And I was like, fuck it. And so we popped all these seeds, and my buddy ran them in the backyard. We saved clones, and we ran them all in the backyard. And the one that stood out of some ridiculous amount of plants were a little patch of the vanilla berry pie from Aficionado. And you could literally see from 50 feet away, you'd look over in the garden and you'd be like, what the fuck is that over there? And sure enough, it was a patch of, and they were all fire, but there was one in particular that was just frosty, and it had a real jammy nose on it. And it checked all the boxes every way. We actually lost the clone. So super disappointed, but I hit up Leo, and being the nice guy that he is, he actually had 30 seeds left, and he gave me 20 of the 30 seeds. The facility has those next week, actually, so I can go through them and try to find some or do some crosses with them and see what we can come up with. If I can get some more jammy, I love jammy terps. I like jammy terps. I like orange terps. I like all terps that taste good. If you can smoke it down to the roach, I love it. That's my jam, is being able to smoke whatever it is down to the roach. If it still tastes good and it has an amazing effect, there's a bunch of good stuff out there. So, but there's a bunch of shitty growers out there too. That's part of the problem with stuff is people, in my opinion, is the level, and everybody has a different opinion. Some people like to just get high. I love to get high and smoke something that tastes good, so I want to keep smoking it.
Yeah.
The whole oil ring gas thing, it's cool. It's cool. Like this stuff right here doesn't have a super white ash, but it has a good oil ring on it. But that doesn't matter to me as much as flavor. I want my stuff to taste amazing. At the end of the day, it tastes amazing. You fire that roach up the next day, it should taste amazing. And that's kind of the stuff I grew up with that was amazing. We had the cat piss. Cat piss was, and I think that there's different cat pisses. I'm actually going to do a podcast on this. So, interested in podcasts that have a cat piss story. I'm basically going to compile a whole bunch of cat piss stories so that everyone can tell their story. Because I feel that it's a terp profile. I feel that not even a terp, it's styles, but it's in combination with things that actually made it smell pissy. And it was the flower we had in the Bay Area, and it was more of a sativa than an indica, and obviously representations, there's probably some of that stuff you can pull off of, something that's a broadleaf. If we're talking about, narrow leaf versus broadleaf, I would say that what we had was a narrow leaf, and there's probably also broadleaf expressions that had it in there as well, like some Afghanica style that had that ammonia. Because what it was is really with our cat piss was the skunk. It was skunky skunk with ammonia. And it wasn't like OG, and it wasn't like chem or rocket fuel or burnt tire or those things that make that amazing. It was ammonia that burned your nose. And it would think of a whole room. Like literally one little small piece of it would smell a whole room up. You'd have it in your shirt. You walk, I was in school at the time. I think I was 14. And like you wouldn't want to go to school after you smoked a bunch of cat piss because everybody would know you're smoking cat piss or smoking weed. So good stuff.
It was. And that is, the profile I remember too. And that's a lot of times with some of these, older strains is people just have different memories of the profile. But the cat piss, everybody's pretty close on that. The roadkill skunk is one where there's a lot of wide variety. But these are things that we need to continually look for and try to find and bring back. And I know that the cat piss in particular is one that you're doing a good effort with. So I'll be excited to see that because I would love to bring it back.
So funny because I don't know. I mean, obviously I didn't know everybody back then, but I knew a decent amount of people. And we had a lot of the Grateful Dead weed getting circulated within our groups of friends. And I don't ever remember anything called roadkill skunk back then. Obviously, it could have been, but I do remember some skunky ass weed that was so skunky it smelled like a dead skunk on the side of the road. But I believe that was like there was a skunk from Santa Cruz that was like that too that we used to go pick up, but it was strawberry because of the strawberry size and shaped nuggets.
Oh,
nuggets that were strawberry shaped and amazing.
Yeah, it's been a long time, decades since I've smelled that, and it was in a parking lot at the mountain the last time I smelled it. And I tried to find the source because I had a big jar with me. I was ready to give them my whole jar for like a couple nugs, but they must have left. It was lingering, so it's still out there somewhere. But before we go, I want to let everybody know where they could find, maybe more of you or at least your genetics. So what would be the best place to find that for the viewers out there?
You can find me on Instagram, or you can go to jamesladgenetics.com, and we got a bunch of links there to all our products, and we have some revisions to our website that I think will make it a little more fun and a little faster. That was our version 1 of the website that launched with the new stuff, and we have over 50 different genetics, and we got another 10. My collab for Mosca is actually coming out next week on our website, but you can actually go to Mosca Negra's website, and I think it's moscaseeds.com, and see my collab there. Seeds Here Now has some of my seeds. We got a little bit of it all over. But yeah, jamesladgenetics.com is a great place to go to check me out.
Awesome. I will put all of that in the show notes. So everybody watching, you don't have to remember, just go down in the description. You can click right there. And you mentioned collabs at the end. How about what are 2 of your favorite collabs? Because that way you don't have to pick a favorite. And do you have any in the future that you can tell us about that you're excited for?
Oh, my life is all about collabs. I like partnerships. I like winning together and losing together with my friends. And I feel like that's kind of how that's what defines you as friends, and if your friends make it. But yeah, I mean, Mosca Negre, I did a collab with him. First Class Genetics, my buddy in LA, he fucking crushes. He's doing some big stuff, but I did some breeding work with his gear, and we're doing a collaboration release sometime down the road. Yeah, you name it. With House of Cultivar, we'll probably release some of that eventually, but we're definitely testing out a lot of stuff. I don't know. There's so many.
That's a good problem to have, man. So everybody will tune into the website, they'll catch that. And you've done some with Adam Dunn, the TH Seeds, Sage Against the Machine, I believe it was.
Yeah, we have the Sage Against the Machine coming out. I'm not sure what name we're gonna go with, but either we're doing the Evil Empire. Adam's working on that. I do the breeding and the production more so. Especially that's my thing is my seed production. I love making seeds. I love counting seeds. I love touching seeds, all that stuff. So, but yeah, Sage Against the Machine 2.0, where I think will be the Evil Empire. We're going to be doing that. Those releases will definitely be here before MJ BizCon because I'll be there with seeds. So if you're MJ Biz, come find me. I'm going to be giving out seeds too. So
worth the price of the ticket right there. And I had this sitting next to me too. Don't forget the James Lab Terplock bags because these are pretty badass. I actually had just harvested. I was curing in a jar. You sent me these and I'm like, well, I'm going to toss them in here. I forgot about it for about a month and broke it out the other day. Awesome smell. So yeah, well done. Well done. But thank you for your time, James. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Chad, thank you very much. Come on my show one of these days. I really appreciate it. You guys have a good one.
I'd love to. All right, everybody, stay tuned. There's more to come. And catch you later, James.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that last segment. And now what I want to do is I want to pull something out of the vault and give you a little bit of a backstory. And I chose this one because its roots can be traced back to these land races that we always hear about and talk about. So that is why I pulled out the Purple Royal Afghan from Golden Coast Genetics. And the cross on this features the Long Valley Royal Kush and a BOEL Afghan. Now, the Long Valley Royal Kush has history involving two well-known breeders from the Mendocino area. First, you have Mendel, who is famous for his Royal Kush F7. And you've got Leo Stone from Aficionado, who took that F7 all the way to a F11, and he was selecting more for the gassy or the diesel side of it, and he was also trying to acclimate it to the Long Valley region in Mendocino. So a little bit about the background of the parents on this one. The Long Valley Royal Kush, it includes Sour Diesel, a Highland Afghani, and a Garberville Purple Kush. Now, people who like OGs, Chem Dogs, and Kush, this will be right up your alley. I think this is something that you would dig. It has a profile that can range from gassy all the way to sweet wine grapes. The other side of this cross is why I chose this pack though. So originally I thought BOEL. What is that? Little did I know that stood for a group that I was already vaguely familiar with. So the BOEL name in this cross is the initials of a group known to the world as the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, and to law officials, they were known as the Hippie Mafia. They operated worldwide, but were concentrated in Orange County, California, and from there they distributed their own brand of LSD known as Orange Sunshine. It was a core belief of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love that LSD held transformative powers, and it was their mission to spread it to the world, oftentimes for free. The Brotherhood of Eternal Love funded much of this effort through smuggling, and that included hashish. Now, according to the literature out there, the hash smuggling was purely done to fund the creation and the dissemination of LSD. But In personal conversations with people closer to the events, they've expressed to me that there was a more spiritual connection to the hashish. In a similar way that they believed that LSD would transform the world, they believed in the transformative powers of the full spectrum hash. Hash was smuggled from Afghanistan, namely Kabul or Kandahar. Then it went to Turkey, Germany, England, and finally to the United States. Now, there were many musicians and a load of surfers in the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. So this hash often found itself smuggled inside the hollow cavity of musical instruments and surfboards. The reason this is all important and why I chose this pack today is that the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, when they were in these hash regions in Afghanistan, they were also collecting and bringing back genetics to grow for themselves and others. Now, this is how we got some of the original Afghani genetics from smugglers like the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And that is the story behind this cross. All right, next up we've got Adam, aka The Ranch, who is a breeder I met a couple years ago through the Future Cannabis Project when we were talking about cannabis and medicinal applications. Now, he was already working on breeding and he has not stopped since, so he's got some exciting things. I hope you enjoy this next segment with The Ranch.
Thank you so much for having me, Chad. Always great chatting with you and love the show that you put on. And yeah, love the content you guys are putting out. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Now, we had did a show, oh gosh, I want to say maybe a year ago. It's probably been longer because time flies. And since then, I have had a chance to get my hands on some of your gear, and I've had the chance to run them out. Now, one of them, and this was, well, shoot, it still is actually a very popular pack from you, is the Burgers and Beer, which, oh, I wish I would, there we go, Burgers and Beer. So Donnie Burger, which is a GMO times a Larry OG times the root beer back cross 2. Now, tell us a little bit about this strain and maybe how it came about and kind of why you liked it. Why is it so dang popular, man? This one just, you couldn't keep this on the shelves.
Yeah, so that one came together back in during about 2020. I think the winter of 2020, I was going through my seed collection and I'd been watching some of the Future Cannabis Project auctions and stuff. We were doing some fundraisers for some people in the community, and Mean Gene came on and he was talking about his root beer work. And at the time, the root beer wasn't available. It was just something that he was talking about, and everyone is familiar, or a lot of breeders are familiar with Mean Gene, and a lot of people really respect his opinion. And so if he says it's good, a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to be good. And so when he was hyping up this root beer, everyone is like, oh, this root beer, everyone's so intrigued by it. And the hype was slowly building. And that night I went into my seed collection. I was digging through my packs, just because it's fun to do sometimes, think about what you have, what you could work on. And then I came across, I had bought some seeds from someone who they're doing like a fundraiser, and Mean Gene sent him some seeds, and he sold the seeds to raise some funds for his dog or something. And so he had piña, he had grape soda skunk, he had root beer, he had quite a few things. And at the time, he shared about them, and I was like, oh my gosh, like Mean Gene, I haven't seen his stuff available publicly anywhere. Like, I have to get these seeds. So I bought some from him, put them in the seed collection, and they just ended up sitting there until I watched this episode of Future Cannabis Project. And I had thought I had gotten the grape soda skunk, but as I'm looking through the collection, I pull out the root beer, and I was like, oh, I got the root beer, not the grape soda. So I took them and I talked to a few friends, and I was like, should I pop these now? Should I save them? And I ended up popping them, and over the next close to a year, I ran those out and pheno hunted them and tested them, and there was a little bit of hermaphrodites in them, but Mean Gene has said that, like, I think part of the reason he hadn't been releasing the root beer was because they were a little bit more prone to turning herm. So he had done some selection work and then eventually released the root beer freeze. But this was before the root beer freeze had come out, and so the root beer was getting all this hype, but no one had access to it. And so I'm growing it, and as I was growing it and testing it, I was finding like the smells on it. It's root beer is the name. So I'm like every day I'm in there smelling it, and I'm like, oh, does it smell like root beer? And so it had some, as it went into flower, it had some really interesting smells. And for me, it was almost like the pheno I ended up using was almost, or the female I ended up selecting was almost like a rotting trash kind of smell. It smelled like a hot trash bag, like midway through flower.
Which is scary. We like that smell.
Yeah, and I was thinking root beer. How is this going to turn into root beer? So I was like intrigued. I was like, this is gross smelling. And then I also had this Donny Burger. And so I have some friends that were running a cultivation facility, a licensed cultivation facility here in San Diego called Palomar Grow. And so they were doing a bunch of pheno hunts of seeds. And so they hunted out some Donny Burger and some other things. But when I got to try the Donny Burger, I was really blown away. I was like, wow, this is like, it's straight GMO. It's super nice. The plant's really beautiful. It's super purple. And so I ended up going out to find my own Donny Burger seeds because I was just like so impressed by that variety. So I was like, I got to get my own. So I ended up hunting out my own, and it itself was a very raunchy, like offensive smell kind of thing to it. The GMO smell is just really, really gnarly. And so when I was smelling this hot trash, I was like, oh my gosh, like this has got to be, I got to combine this with the Donny Burger. And so I ended up making the cross, and actually around that same time, Skunk Tech had gotten like the GMO root beer from Mean Gene, the seeds of that. And so he was doing a big pheno hunt of GMO root beer, and the GMO root beer is root beer Backcross 1, which Mean Gene used to make the Backcross 2s, which I was working with the Backcross 2s. And so he had this GMO Backcross 1, and he released a clone of it, and they sold it for a good amount, and they sold a crap ton of them. It got everywhere. So many people were running the GMO root beer. I think it was, it might have been last summer. Maybe it was the summer before, but it really got prolific. And so I think that, there was this GMO root beer clone going around, and everyone was super hyped on it because the root beer hype was big, but still no one had tried pure root beer. And so when I dropped my this isn't it, but when I dropped my burgers and beer seeds, it's almost like a seed line of GMO root beer. So I used a GMO Backcross 1 and then a root beer Backcross 2. So it's very similar to the root beer the GMO root beer, but both parents are backcrosses of the same plants. So I think that one just got a lot of hype because people were like, oh, the clone is available, or I can pheno hunt my own from seed. So I think there was a part of that was just like the excitement over the GMO root beer. So I was just really lucky with timing that Mean Gene and Skunk Tech and those guys just all had been working on, I guess, similar projects. But I was also just really lucky to get the root beer from Mean Gene. So that one actually turned out really, really fun. I've had a ton of people grow them indoors, outdoors. And we found terps ranging from like spray paint and permanent marker all the way to like a more sweet soda type of smell. And so that one's a really cool one to grow. I really enjoy that. We've had some people find some that are really like heavy dumpers for hash.
Oh gosh,
and
yeah.
So I think there's a lot of if you're growing for hash, I think that's a really great one. The root beer itself is known for putting out good hash numbers. And if you follow Dutch Blooms up in Washington, he's done a lot of work with the root beer himself. I think he took the root beer to F4 now, and so he's done a bunch of F4 crosses to like Gorilla Glue and other stuff, and those are putting out good numbers for hash. And he actually has some licensed shops carrying those crosses in rosin on the shelf, so that's pretty cool to see. So I think the root beer is I don't think it's really caught in the hash community's attention, but I think it slowly will, and I think it'll start to be a little bit more prominent in the hash scene.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned some, good names, Skunk Tech and Mean Gene. And that's one thing that I absolutely appreciate about all of your genetics is the sourcing that you've done. You're knowledgeable about where these things kind of come from. And, like you said, is you were kind of in the root beer before it just freaking blew up and took over. You're like, that's interesting. And yeah, Mean Gene is a guy that I love looking to for genetics, for knowledge, and he could tell me a casserole recipe, and I'd be interested in it. So, one of, no, well, one of the other things too that I popped from you too was the purple pineapple, and this actually too does kind of go back to a Mean Gene a little bit. So this has the purple Urkel, which is a classic staple of the Emerald Triangle, times the Pina F4, and that was kind of a contribution from Mean Gene as well.
Yeah, certainly. So I have always been a big fan of Mean Gene's work, and as a aspiring breeder, I was always online, researching, YouTubing, trying to find as much educational content or any kind of content I can find around, cannabis breeding. And so Mean Gene put out a lot of info and a lot of conversations and interviews. So I really valued his input. But also I started to find that, he's really line breeding stuff further than your average person just making F1 hybrids. So I thought, if I'm going to be breeding, I should be using true, a good breeding foundation to start breeding with. So Mean Gene's work has always been something that I, wanted to be working with, because I felt like he was putting the work in to make it a valuable tool for a breeder to use. And so the Pina was one I was always really interested in. And so the Pina I grew actually the next year after the root beer. And I got those at the 2018 Emerald Cup from Mean Gene himself. He released Pina in different versions. So he had Pina number 1, number 2, number 3, and these were they were F4 seeds. But so each generation he might select a different. He might select multiple mother plants, and so he steered the Pina into different directions. So he, has different options available. So I used the number 1 version, and I grew those out. And then the same season, Sungrown Mids was growing some out, and so he actually did some really cool. He did a Pina hash plant that turned out really cool. So I was seeing other people growing the Pina. I was growing the Pina, and I was super excited about it. I was making F5s in that pollination. And so I was like, if I'm going to preserve this, let's, do some hybrids too. And so I've got really into collecting clones. And so there was a guy, Laser's Library on Instagram. He's a really cool dude. He has a huge, incredible library. He really does the legwork to find out, the cuts he's sourcing, where are they coming from? Are they real? He's testing them. So I really trust his input and his collection. He's a really respectable dude. So I got the Urkel from him, and I ran it out in my backyard, and oh my gosh, I was super impressed. One of my first grows ever from seed was using CSI Humboldt's seeds, and I got a couple purple Urkel hybrids from him. One of them was the Mendel Mendel Purps times purple Urkel, and we grew that one, and we found one that we really, really liked, and it was like incredible flower, but man, the grow of it had terrible growing characteristics. Like the leaves were just so big, and it was so squat that like it just needed extensive deleafing to get any kind of light. So I knew that like the flavor in the Urkel stuff was really special, but with that Mendel purple Urkel, I knew there were some traits that might not be so desirable. So I was really intrigued to work with it myself. And so when I grew the purple, I was like, the purple Urkel. I was like, man, all those ugly traits I didn't like, they weren't in the Urkel. They must have been coming from the Mendel Purps. So I was really happy to have that Urkel. And it was really interesting smells on the flowers. And so I did that cross. And actually there's someone on Instagram, their name is Adult Trees. And they actually... they've grown them out, and they've found some really cool ones, but they weren't in the stage of like keeping clones. So they've actually reached out to get more of those seeds to grow them. And I'm hoping this year they'll keep some backups to keep it going. Yeah. But we ran out of the Urkel Pina. People really like that one. And there's some really cool fruity smells to be found on them. The Pina has been known to carry some CBD potential. So in some of the seeds, some of the offspring, sometimes you'll find some that have a little bit of CBD in them. And so in that cross, in the Pina cross I did, I also pollinated a pineapple tsunami from Southern Humboldt Seed Co. And the guy who started that company was Lawrence Ringo. And so he's a breeder who I really look up. Really, he really set the foundation for CBD genetics to be worked with in America. And he did the tsunami and a bunch of other tsunami strains. So that work was some of the first work I started doing with CBD stuff. CBD is really where I'm really passionate about CBD, but as a smoker and a consumer, like I don't see a lot of people buying CBD. I don't see a lot of people growing CBD. Even like the real headiest of dudes who love weed, like they don't necessarily love CBD. So I'm really passionate about trying to get more CBD genetics out there into people's
Good.
hands, make stuff that's more of like a 1-to-1 ratio.
Mhm.
So my goal lately has been driving more towards CBD type 2 hash varieties. So I found that in the CBD world, nothing yields in hash, especially
No.
the hemp stuff. And there could be a whole market of CBD rosin and hemp rosin, and I think people would love that. But the genetics just really aren't there yet. And also, I know that I love THC myself, but my parents, if I offer them a dab, like, man, they're so scared, they're freaked out. My siblings, like, no one wants to take a dab that doesn't smoke. So if I could offer them a
Yeah.
dab 1-to-1, it might be a lot more appealing. So that's kind of the
Right.
direction I'm working towards lately, and I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome, and I'm glad you mentioned that actually, and I just reached over for this. It's like this is the one like cart concentrate thing that I smoke because this is 45% CBD. This is how
Awesome.
I'm able to get a large dose of CBD for my body. It has to come in this form, or like you're saying, dabs, because there aren't super high potency CBD just flower strains itself, but we're getting there. We got there with THC, so we can do the same with CBD. It's going to take, an effort, and I'm glad to hear that you're behind it because, you have specific medicinal needs for cannabis, and CBD helps me. I think more people are going to get into it. 1-to-1, as you mentioned, is my preferred ratio. The stores here, these things come in a 20-to-1, a 10-to-1, a 5-to-1, a 2-to-1, and a 1-to-1. And I've tried them all multiple times. 1-to-1 for me does the best. So that's cool. And I did, when I ran the purple pineapple again with the purple Urkel and the Pina F4, it was an amazing structure. It grew like short, which I like because I'm growing intense. But it had like the perfect candelabra. Like I didn't need to really top anything. The lower branches came up to the apical cola, and there was a little bit of defoliating. It had some big leaves, but that's absolutely fine. It was a perfect trade-off, and the flower was wonderful. And I do lack of testing here, but I do feel there was some CBD in it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, both of these went the wayside when I was in Amsterdam for my long 30-day trip. I lost a few things while I was gone. So unfortunately, those were them, but if you can hear, I've got some more chances. So I'm not totally heartbroken. A couple other things, though, that I have here that I want to pop from you very soon as well. They both involve the Pina F4, which, again, great base stock to have. You explained the reasons why earlier. But this is another one that you're ahead of the curve on, because right now everybody's talking about that Cuban black haze. Everybody's, give me the pith, give me the haze, give me the Cuban black. So this one is definitely going to be pop soon. And was there any story behind maybe this one or the Cuban black haze that you came across?
Not as much of a story behind that. The Cuban black I got from Masonic. I actually went up to his
Oh,
house and was
nice.
able to pick that from his garden. He was really, really great dude, really sharing. Really lucky to be able to call him a friend. I really enjoyed that Cuban black as someone from San Diego, SoCal, and also being as young as I am. I grew up in the era of just OG, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually OG and cookies, and there was really no other options as a buyer, and especially buying from like the dealer. It's not like he has a
It's a
menu of jars
variety.
dispensaries do. And then eventually, once I did start going to the dispensaries, there was a local shop called Greenworks SD, and I remember my first time going in. They're like, "We're an indica heavy shop," and like everything they have is just different OG variants. And I was like, "Oh man, I loved it," but So trying the haze for me was like, is like a first time moment. So that was really special and really cool. But I will say the haze it's not my cup of tea. Honestly, the terp profile is just,
Mhm.
it's so unique and it's so different. And I can appreciate it, but it might not be the jar I go to first. But the effects are they're just so remarkable. For me, that's what's special about it.
Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily about the Cuban Black, but more so, so I was hanging out with Trevor Sungrown Mids, and he'd
Mhm.
grown a lot of the Malawi. That he had a 3 chems Malawi, and then I think he had the Malawi Wilson. And we were smoking the 3 chems Malawi. We actually did a little road trip from San Diego up to LA to Masonic Shop, and we were smoking backwood after backwood of this Malawi. And oh my gosh, dude, it was crazy. The
Scary.
highs are so different, and it's like you don't expect it. You wouldn't think you would get scared or uncomfortable from weed, and as an experienced smoker, you just keep puffing away, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, like I do not want to be around. So that was kind of a funny experience. And so with the Cuban Black Pina, Immortal Hashery actually got a bunch of those, and he's run them out. I'm not sure if he has a selection from them, but the goal with that was to kind of try and meld the pith terps with a little bit of a pineapple uh, essence to them. But the Cuban or the Pina itself is a little bit on the sativa side in the way it looks, its structure and everything. So I was just thinking that'd be kind of a fun combo to make. And I actually have another friend who ran them up north. His Instagram is Ravenous Agronomist. He's a fellow Gantier student.
Okay.
And he's no longer up north. I think he's in the Midwest somewhere now, but he did some cool work with those as well. So I think if you like sativas, then yeah, that's a really great one to start with. Um,
I've heard in talking with Trevor Sungrown Mids a few times. He has told me about the Malawi crosses that he had, and I remember seeing him grow those out. And yeah, he legitimately has said, I've scared a few people with this thing. I've wrecked a couple people's. I've ruined a few days with these strings. But it's some of the older, like closer to landrace stuff. A lot of the things that he's interested in working with. That's one of the things that older people, older than myself, talk about. Some of these, the Colombians and the Oaxacans, and straight from Afghanistan. Is just the highs, the effects were different, something that we're not seeing in today's market. So sometimes it is cool to get some of those crosses, and when they express, be prepared.
totally. Yeah, Trevor's actually doing some really cool work this summer. I know he's working with some of the pure Malawi from Bodhi, from a guy named Afro Pips, from a few different groups. So he's going to be doing some really cool preservations and hybrids. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, definitely. Sun-grown mids, everybody. And I'll try to get him on the show too, because I have a few. I actually do have that Pina hash plant cross that you were talking about. So got a couple things from him we could talk about. One more thing I wanted to bring up from you before we get into some of your new stuff and where people will be able to find the new stuff was the puree, which really interested me. It was the banana mango, and you used the banana OG and the blueberry muffin from Humboldt Seed Company. Now, I have nothing but great things to say about Humboldt Seed Company and the selection and the strains that they make. So that one, again, knowing the Pina F4, I like it. Having these in there was really interesting to me. Why did you maybe take these selections and use them from the Humboldt Seed Company?
Yeah, so that banana mango is what it is. Yeah. So I was
Yep.
able to I
Ooh.
follow them closely, and they're sharing online about their 10,000 plant pheno hunt, where they partnered with a bunch of local farms, and they gave them seeds, and then they were collectively as a group, growing out and assessing all these plants. And so I thought, wow, that's actually pretty freaking cool. And
Yeah.
so I was able the clone that they released from that 10,000 plant pheno hunt, that banana mango came from the hunt. And so it has like a really
Clone.
tropical terp kind of to it. And I had the banana OG at the same time. And so I thought this one was like totally different than just banana. So it was a really cool one. And I really just wanted to combine that one because it's like Just the terps, the terp combo is what I was going for with that. The pineapple with the banana mango is really the idea there. And my buddy, actually locally, he grew some of those out, and we did a full pack. And there were some that were a little bit more on the Jackie side, which we were kind of bummed about. But one of them was actually like a red Hawaiian punch smell, and it was just like straight tropical fruit punch. It was just really unique and really cool. So we found some fun ones out of those.
Yeah, you're making me want to pop these like today when we hang up. Like, oh, that sounds awesome. That's something that I've been missing. And that's another thing that I like about the selection and the variety you offer. You really kind of touch on all the bases. You're not like stuck into the hot garbage category. You're not, which we love, but or the tropical category. You people can find a little bit of everything from you. And we kind of talked briefly about what's coming up. I'm excited about that, and I did have a couple questions though, so I'm not going to skip over the questions, even though I'm extremely excited to talk about your new work. But just a couple things. I always like to ask people, because there's a lot of people that watch this show that they're collecting their intelligence, they're gathering their information, they're conceiving a game plan of how they may want to do it, because a lot of people want to do breeding. They want to make seeds, and they want to come up with some new fire. So there's different ways to do it, but everybody has to start somewhere. So I always like to ask people is like, what was your first cross, or the first cross you can remember that was maybe intentional? A lot of us have unintentional first crosses, but maybe what was one of the first crosses that you did? And do you remember what you were using and maybe why you were using them?
Totally. So I've been collecting seeds for quite a while before I even did my first intentional crossing, and I've been collecting them. We had been working towards setting up a commercial grow here in San Diego, and we were on track to have one set up, and the laws changed and regulation, all these things happened, all this bureaucracy, and it really delayed us. So I had amassed a pretty big seed collection, and through listening to content like Future Cannabis Project and listening to all these breeders, I hear people talk about, maybe you don't want to breed with just the single pack that you have. Maybe you want to buy 10 packs of that same thing if you really like it, and then find the best out of 100 rather than just the best out of 10. And so I was thinking, okay, that should be the way that I go about this. So I went out and I got some, as I was buying seeds now, I was no longer buying single packs. I would make sure to buy 5 to 10 packs of that one thing. And so one year I went to the Emerald Cup, and I went to the Emerald Mountain Legacy booth, and I knew I wanted something from them. And so I was talking to them for a little while, and they talked me into the Mendel Kush, which is something that was a limited release to that Emerald Cup. And it was Turpentine OG crossed to the Truth, and then that male's crossed to Royal Kush. And so I looked into it, and the Royal, the Truth, and the I forget the other one. They're all like Mandelbrot's flagship strains, the three strains that he's most known for producing. So they combined them all together and called it Mandelbrot Kush. And so I had a bunch of those, and then I had also gotten I talked to someone online, and they suggested I check out South Lake Seed Co. I think is what they're called. South Lake. No, maybe that's not their name. South Fork Seeds. So South Fork Seeds. They did something called Cherry Chem. So a lot of their crosses are a Chem 1 back cross. I think back cross 3. That. So they have one called South Fork Push that's popular. But I got the Cherry Chem, and there was someone I heard, I forget which brand, but someone selected a Cherry Chem from that same seed line up north, and there's a clone that goes around Humboldt of it. And I got it before at one of the Emerald Cups, and it was like the first time I ever tried like no-till living soil flower, and it was really good. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to pop these seeds, because not only do I have a bunch of them, but I've tried it. And so I ended up popping the Mandelbrot Kush and the Cherry Chem, because those were the ones I had a lot of, and so I knew, okay, these are ones I can take a gamble with, and if I mess up or something happens, it's not a loss, but also I can make a selection from these. And I knew this was my first breeding project, so I knew not only I really didn't know what I was doing. So I went into it with the idea of I need to learn how to do this. So the whole project was to, learn what breeding's about, learn how to select. And I spent a lot of time there rubbing stems, smelling plants, comparing leaves,
Yeah.
tasting the sap on them and stuff. So I just really got in with the plants and tried to, really learn them as much as I could. But at the end of the day, I just let the plants do their pollination, and I ended up growing those out the next summer. And the cherry chem. So I did the Mandelbrot Kush. I made F2s, and then I crossed the Mandelbrot Kush also to the cherry chem. And I actually also did some CBD femmes, and I pollinated those as well. So those were called Continuum. And so I did 3 hybrids, and they were all from seeds I selected as a female, and then the seed I selected as a male. And so I ended up growing a bunch of those out, and I actually was really stoked on what I found. Like the next summer, the nugs I got from the hybrids were, I think, better than the ones that I got from the plain plants. The cherry chem was like super, super dominant in the hybrids, and they were just really, really funky and almost identical to the cherry chem. I guess she's just really dominant. But yeah, so I did that, and then from there I started playing around with some landrace, and I just really tried to, I hear all these people talking about breeding, and I knew that, you can take people when it comes to growing weed, like everyone's telling you grow this way, grow that way, and I just know that I got to take everything with a grain of salt, and I really got to experiment for myself and try to decide for myself what I think is true or what I think is the right way. And so I'm just a big fan of experimentation and learning for yourself. And I think I think everyone should be breeding and making their own lines. I think it's super valuable, to not only in the long run are you developing something that has, can last years, your strain, whereas the flower you grow, if you're growing the super boof that everyone else is growing, like, man, is it really that special? I don't know. But if you have something that you made yourself, I feel like it just adds so much value to the product, but then also it adds so much value to when you consume it, it's just, you appreciate it so much more. The work that went into it and the love that you gave it. I just think it adds so much more fun to the whole experience of smoking and enjoying cannabis.
It really does, man. It's awesome to hear you put that into words as well, because that's, a big part of kind of my philosophy as well. A lot of what you said there. And I think a lot of people too watching the show who have been thinking about it needed to hear that as well, because there is an approach to take, and there's different routes of going it. But I love that you've thought about it ahead of time. And that's one of the most important things I think with like breeding is have an intention. None of us are like super fancy geneticists with multi-million-dollar machines to check markers or anything. So a lot of it is kind of a crapshoot, but then it really comes about selection. And then a few steps down the road, you realize like, wow, I've really kind of got these particular traits going on this plant line now. Like I can continue that, and that's something that I love. So yeah, it's good information for everybody to hear. So thank you for just dropping your philosophy there.
Thank you. And I think you touched on something important there. I think intention is like the most important thing around it, because when you're making seeds, it's so easy to make seeds, and it's so easy to make crap seeds too, and you really have no idea what you're making until you're willing to go the extra step of not only growing them, but maybe share them with people to test. But, just have intention when you're doing the work, and it'll take you so much further than just random mishaps. And there's nothing wrong with random mishaps either. I think that, when it comes down to it, I was listening to the podcast the other day, and they're talking about, I forget who the fellow was that was being interviewed, but it's the guy who's behind OG, the guy who made the pollination. And, I realized watching that, like, all the best stuff was all accidents, and we can put all the attention in as much as we want, but like still the accidents end up being better than the fully intentional stuff. So, going with intent, know that, not everything's set in stone. So don't expect your accident to be a failure.
Yeah, that is hilarious too, because that is one thing I like to remind people. It's like some of the best stuff came from a bag seed. So We don't even need to debate it. That's just the history, folks. But speaking to intention, though, the one other question I kind of had now, you do fill the full palette of flavors and profiles, but what is it that you're maybe looking for, or particular traits in a plant when you're selecting like a keeper? Is it profile, structure, strength? What tends to be top of your list?
For me, I think for me generally, just the overall structure is one of the more important things. Sometimes you get a plant that just looks off, and it just doesn't fit the bill for what you're going for. Maybe it's super squat or it's super stretchy. So just the general structure for me is always important. But also, I think what the project is plays a huge role in this deciding in my decision making process. So if I'm working with like with this, I did a CBD project recently. I've hunted through these type 2 seeds, and when I selected for a male, I selected for a male that to me looked the most sativa or the most hemp like, because I felt like if there's hemp genetics in these, it's a CBD times a cookie crossed with a CBD times a cookie, 2 different hemp plants crossed a cookie crossed together. And so I was thinking, if there's any kind of outlier in here that looks like a weird sativa-ish hemp plant, it's probably carrying those traits that I'm wanting to pass, which are hemp genetic traits. So I'm experimenting with those offspring right now to try and see, did that male really carry those hemp traits? I'm not sure. But so if I'm going for like the hemp stuff, I'm going to look for plants that kind of fit that structure. So I also did another pollination recently with a TK-M10 hybrid. And so in the plants that grew from there, you could see some of them, the OG stretch was like really dominant in them. And, I think structure is important, but the structure, can change depending on what you're going for. So structure is one of the main things, but on top of that is terps and effects. Those to me are more important than structure, but those things you don't really see till the end. So you really got to get it to finish to really see those. So in the beginning processes, you can kind of weed out through structure the stuff that doesn't fit the bill. And then as you get closer to when they really start to show their full flowers and their true characteristics, that's kind of when I start to get into the weeds or the whatever. But that's when I really start to determine which one is worth keeping and which one's not. So terps, effects, structure, I would say it goes in that kind of order.
Awesome. Very, very good things to look for. And those are all things that I consider as well. And everybody, will have different priorities, but a lot of times we're pulling from the same cup. We're just rearranging the order. So it is good to have priorities, though, particularly for projects. I like to try to breed for a lot of indoor stuff. So I tend to look for things that are short. And I've had some amazing tall things, but I've nixed them because that's not what I'm going for at the moment. One day when I can grow outdoors, they'll come back out. But for the future, though, I would love to hear about. You kind of mentioned it a little bit, one of the projects that you have, but I'd love for you to take a couple minutes just to highlight what is upcoming and what people can be excited to see, and also where can they find it? Where can they stay in touch with you? So that was multiple questions at once, but we'll go for it.
Totally. So the latest project right now, so I have a local buddy, and his brand is MedTree. His Instagram is medtree_. And his brand, it was MedTree Seeds a long time ago. So when I first got into the scene, and I started going to Cannabis Cups and seeing all the different seed brands, but also all the other brands. MedTree Seeds was one of the first brands I saw at an event with a booth, and they were pushing CBD seeds. And so to me, that was really a little bit surprising, because all the other guys are pushing, super heavy THC stuff. And as a smoker who hadn't really discovered the value of CBD yet, I, thought it was curious that, someone was working so hard on this CBD stuff. So I thought, oh, that's cool that they're there. And then through the years of discovering that I had epilepsy, I started really making CBD a real, part of the things that I collected. If it had CBD, I needed it in the collection. And I tried to have a really solid CBD collection for when we were moving into the future. And so I ended up not being able to really hunt any of that stuff. But I had all these CBD things from MedTree, and I knew of him. And then I was lucky enough to actually find out that he lives local, and then got in touch with this little community of local breeders. And we have a little meetup every month. And so he comes out, and so I've been able to become friends with him. And he's a really cool dude. And so he shared with me a bunch of his stock that is like no longer available anywhere else. And it's all his CBD stuff. So he brought me a bunch of his special CBD gear because he knew I was going to be doing some work with CBD. And so he brought me this one called Double Cookies. And back in, I think, 2015 or 2014, he won the High Times Cannabis Cup for an AC/DC cookies. And it was actually really cool. It was a 1-to-1 cut. And they didn't have CBD in the competition, but his still won and beat out the THC cuts, which was really cool. So he's built a name for himself in the CBD space. And so I was talking to him about working with that AC/DC cookies, and he said, oh, the Susie cookies was a really special one. So I ended up working with something from him called Double Cookies, which is, if you can see it on here, AC/DC cookies times Susie cookies. And he calls it Double Cookies. And so I ended up crossing that. My like I said earlier, my goal lately has been to really push some of these CBD type 3 or type 2 plants to cross them into hash plants. And because, it takes a certain type of plant that yields into bubble hash. So I want to try and bring them together to try and mesh yields, CBD, and terps. It's got to taste good too. And so one of the crosses that I'm testing out right now, this is the same Donny Burger I used for the burgers and beer, which is a GMO cross 1 crossed to the Double Cookies. So I'm hunting in through this to find some CBD profiles, but with the GMO nose. So I'm excited about those. I'm actually also hunting. I don't have the pack in front of me right now, but I also pollinated the Skittles. So I'm calling it ZBD. So I'm hunting the ZBD, the Donny Burger Double Cookies. And I'm actually I did a small pollination, just a single plant pollination with Snow Monkey from Bodhi Seeds.
Nice.
Snow Monkey, Gorilla Glue 4, Snow Lotus. And so I pollinated Grease Monkey, which is Gorilla Glue 4 cookies and cream. So this one is a little bit, both of them have Gorilla Glue as a parent. One of them is a heavy hasher, and then one is a really good outdoor producer. So I'm just having fun with this one while I do the CBD hunt as well. And I'm really excited for the CBD stuff. There's actually another guy out there, 6 Star Seeds. He has a cut he selected. I think he's calling it Guavanana CBD, and it's a 1-to-1 hash strain that yields good and it presses into rosin. So he's one worth checking out if you're interested in that kind of stuff. He has the cut is, ready to go. So there's some other people doing this type of work, but, I think more of us need to be doing it because even though there's people doing it, there's not enough people growing it. So let's get more of these growers growing this stuff. And I think we can start to see a shift in the market of, I think the average person who doesn't like to smoke, I think part of them not liking to smoke is that, smoking, it's a little bit harsh of an experience compared to dabbing. Dabbing, the flavor is just so smooth. You don't get any of the burny smoke. You don't have a burn for an hour if you're not a smoker. So I think dabs are I really think they're the future for non-smokers. But I think they're just too strong right now. So I think that if we can start to balance things out a little bit, I think we can get more consumers smoking hash, which I think would be a really cool thing.
And kind of like I mentioned too, is it's a great way for high concentrations of CBD or other minor cannabinoids for that matter. But that is, something that I enjoy. And I think, like you said, a lot of others too, once we bring down the potency on some of it. Because again, the people who aren't used to smoking doesn't appeal to them, but also who don't consume cannabis or THC on a regular basis, going the route of the dab, which it's a lot more concentrated. That's a hurdle for some people. But if we're able to focus on these minor cannabinoids, and maybe put like 10% THC or something minor in there, but still enough to give a synergistic effect with the CBD. So I think you're on the right path, man.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of medicinal value, and I think that there could be a lot of consumers who find a lot of relief through this type of medicine. And so I'm really hopeful. I know it's possible since Six Star Seeds has his selection out there. So I just think we need to get more flavor options out there for people. So I'm excited to work on it, and yeah, just keep pushing the envelope, I think.
Absolutely. Well, let's let people know where they can find you. Where can they pick up your gear? Where can they follow your grows? What are some good places to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best place for social media for me is just Instagram. I'm at _the ranch. I'm also at _the ranch 2.0. And my seeds are available at Future Cannabis Project's website, daga.garden or daga.love. That would probably be the best place to grab them. And then I also have some other I have other gear that's root beer crosses available through Regenerative Seed Co. You can grab those as well. They are a totally different menu than what's on Future Cannabis Project. So check those out as well. And yeah, those are the two places where my gear's at. I'm eventually going to be working on a website, but for now we're comfortable where we're at. So
awesome, dude. Well, thank you very much for making the time today. I know we've ran double of what I said it would probably take, but it's been freaking fascinating, and I know I could go twice as long. But everybody watching, thank you. Stay tuned. We got more to come in this episode. But this is Adam the Ranch. Make sure you guys check out his work and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Chad. Have a great day, guys.
I hope you all enjoyed that section, and I'm going to introduce something new to the show here, something that we haven't done on the Seed Collectors in the past. But what I want to do is highlight one of those breeders that is no longer with us. And unfortunately, over time, we've lost a lot of great breeders, but through their genetics, through their work, and through their life, they are still with us. And today I want to talk about a very charismatic person, and that person is Subcool. Now, why that ties into my seed collection is because TGA Genetics, Team Green Avenger, as it was known back then, with Subcool, was the first pro genetics that I had. It was a Jax Cleaner 2, and I still have the seed pack. TGA, Subcool. And if you look on the back here, oh my gosh, there are some classics there. I mean, Agent Orange, Jilly Bean, Vortex, Time Wreck, Jack the Ripper. TGA, Subcool beans, they were responsible for a lot of cool things. And one person that I wanted to bring in to talk about Subcool is Eagle Gardens, because they knew each other, they interacted with each other. I was just a fanboy. So let me turn it over to Eagle Gardens and we'll talk a little bit more about Subcool.
Subcool was a good guy. He helped teach a lot of us, or gave a lot of us an opportunity to pop some seeds. Most definitely popped or gave out a lot of seeds to just about anybody he passed, but I think his passion most definitely inspired a lot of people to put those seeds to dirt 100%. Yeah, he inspired me to grow a lot of great stuff. He showed me how to grow a lot of great fire. That's 100%. And I was honored enough to spend a lot of great time with him behind the scenes. So I have a lot of respect for Sub. And it's nice to hear that one of your first strains, Jack Cleaner 2, was one of your choices. So what initially, I guess, we'll flip it around a little bit, drew you to draw that strain out of anything you could have, chosen? What drove so?
It was the availability. It was early in the medical days, and I didn't know, shit from Shinola. So when the dispensary that I was going to had clones on offer and they had this Jax Cleaner too, I'm like, okay, I'll check that out. Bought it, loved it, and I'm like, I have to get the seeds. I have to be able to grow this again in the future. And really, for me, it was learning more about TGA, Subcool, and the purpose behind it. It was the medicinal application and trying to help specific people in his life with different strains. And a lot of his stuff that I grew subsequently had amazing terpene profiles. And that's what a lot of us talk about these days is, you know, terpenes is where it's at. And he was far ahead of that conversation, way ahead of that conversation.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Terpenes were basically his passion. You know, trying to find the unique flavors out there. You know, we all know more fruits laid more to his jam side of things, but he wanted to find every flavor under the sun, and he wasn't gonna give up. That was his passion, was pretty much to try to find every flavor under the sun. And or if he couldn't do it, he wanted basically he encouraged the Weed Nerd Army to help him look through the many seeds that he was producing to find that next big thing. So,
And he
yeah, I love that about the man, 100%.
he was an enigmatic character. He was out there. He was not afraid to talk to anybody and everybody. And like you said, you know, it's like, hey, pop these. Tell me. Let me know how they go. So he really put himself out there again in a time when it wasn't absolutely safe to put yourself out there.
100%. And that's another thing, you know, we talk about sub giving away seeds, you know, and a lot of those were testers and things that were, you know, coming, but a lot of times some that had such a big heart, if you couldn't afford seeds and you sat down and sent him an email, or if you're lucky enough to be able to get a hold of him directly, or, you know, bump into him, and you needed a pack, you genuinely needed a pack, he made sure you had that and then some to get your journey going with cannabis. And again, so many reasons, you know, to give that man some respect and props. And one of, you know, I want to throw this out there. One of the things that I loved about Sub, to be honest with you, not only did he have the passion to throw the seeds out there and give you seeds, encourage you to pop seeds, but he was one of the few people at the time that walked it like he talked it, okay? Not only what did he have and produce seeds, but he did, you know, the Weed Nerd, and would show you weekly, take you right inside the garden and show you the strains that were on the menu, those 6-7 foot plants, those fucking donkey dick buds, and go, yes, you can do this. You can do this. And this is how you do it, through the super soil, the quad recipe, under the lights, you know what I mean? He was very transparent on, you know, what he was doing and how you could do it with the seeds, and encourage you to do the hunting and finding, you know, that gem that suited you. Because, you know, he was, as we all know, cannabis can be very independent, very singular to your needs. Whatever suits you the best is very individualized with cannabis, and he encouraged you to find that pheno that worked best for you. And yeah, great man. It's an honor to be able to speak for him, you know, or in honor of him, to be honest with you. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I really appreciate that, because, you know, if people go and watch your show, the fucking Talking Shit with Eagle show, they're going to catch a lot of stories and a lot of memories and a lot of lessons, actually, that you've learned directly from Subcool. He, for me, set me, and this is without ever meeting him, just what he did and his philosophy and putting it out there. He set me on a particular course with cannabis, and that was as a medicinal thing that can help a lot of people. and I've never wavered from that. I thought that was one of the noblest things you could do with this plant. I know how it has helped me, and I want it to help other people. So I continue to search. So not only was what he was doing and being transparent inspirational to others, not just myself, but for people like you who had direct contact and relations with them, taught you how to, do the quad grow, taught people about super soil. He was not selfish in that sense of hoarding the medicine, hoarding the recipe, hoarding how it's all done. He was as transparent could be. And again, when he was doing this, it was far ahead of his time. So thank you, Eagle, for coming and sharing a few moments. I know it's a very close relationship, and that's why I wanted to have you here. So thank you for doing that.
One last thing before we go, and yeah, Sub did touch a lot of us, and a lot of people are just discovering Sub as you're talking about. And if you're lucky enough to get some of his seeds, I highly suggest you get those and pop those and keep the legacy alive in that way. But moreover, if you're just hearing the name, you too can still be a weed nerd from the very first episode. Go back and watch some of those gems that fired up the passion in a lot of us. Though the strains might not still be available, the good times, the wisdom, the magic that was Sub, thankfully, still is available on his channel. So go back and check out some of those episodes. I guarantee you, if you watch from the first episode, you'll watch a few more. So thank you for keeping his memory alive, my friend. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, my friend.
Thank you. You as well. I look forward to catching you later. And everybody watching now, I'm going to put a lot of Subcool's information as well as his channel down in the show notes. So you can get started being a weed nerd. And when you're ready to continue, go check out Eagle's The Weed Nerds World. So stay tuned, everybody. We got more coming up in this episode. But thank you very much, Eagle. You're the man, dude.
Thank you, Chad.
All right, now another thing that I wanted to start doing is highlighting some of the awesome books out there with cannabis photography and share a little bit about cannabis history. Now, one such book is Higher, and you can catch it from these guys, but really nice book. It's got amazing photography in here, and it tells some really, cool stories about some of the plants. The story of OG Chem right there, GG4. I mean, pretty well done book, so I definitely recommend you check that out if you are a bud aficionado. But today for this segment I have State 3 Farms, who is in Higher for their Acapulco Gold. So I talked to him all about that, and let's get to it.
Thank you. This Acapulco Gold, this was sourced from Mob Seeds, Mountain Organic Botanicals, I believe. It's an Acapulco Gold mom, sourced from the 70s in San Diego, and it just it's your typical Acapulco Gold. It's one of the most classic strains, one of the first strains to actually have a name in the cannabis world that people would recognize and seek out. And so it's really important in the history of cannabis too. One of the first strains that was specifically trafficked. If you go through the history, you'll hear people like Gary Tovar. That name will come up a lot. He was one of the most famous California smugglers, and who I know that you are a fan of punk music. He started Golden Voice, which was a punk music thing to kind of use his money, and he was bringing this sativa from it's a coastal mountain range in area of Mexico, and it's being near the equator, it's those long running sativas have that 12-hour light time, so they really grow long. They have the time to finish, where us being in the Pacific Northwest, a long running sativa won't really finish easily. But the Acapulco Gold, in another famous example is Cheech and Chong. Who doesn't know the no stems, no seeds that you don't need. Acapulco Gold is as weed. It's famous. It's famous, and it's sweet. It's fruity. It has it's sweet and fruity. But it also has this earthy undertone that it's like peppery and earthy that you just don't get that flavor in any of these modern day hybrids that we're seeing. The feeling, what it is really for me, why we go for these land races, specifically sativas have a spot in my heart, but it's the feeling that you get, the energizing, uplifting. They say kind of like the similar sentiments to haze, where they say there's no ceiling on this high, where you or some people call it creeper. They call it creeper, and which is kind of an old, dated term, but it's kind of what it is they're talking about a feeling when you smoke this these old school sativas, you get it's a clear-headed, energizing feeling, and it's really something that I hope doesn't get lost in this over hybridization of the industry. And we have taken it upon ourselves, my wife and I, here in this small farm, to keep the classics alive. We started a whole just subgenre of our business called State 3 Classics, and we keep the Acapulco Golds, the Maui Wowies, the Panama Reds, the Sensi Stars, the Hindu Kushes. But Acapulco Gold is one of the most, like I said, first strains that really went for it, and people were like, I want that Acapulco Gold. I don't know, I'm kind of going off here. I don't know if there's any, sorry.
This is awesome. This is perfect, because this is what a lot of people want to learn about and know about. Not everybody has been around. Like Acapulco Gold predates me, even with all this gray hair. It was around before I was, and like you said, it had its name. And that's something that I think more people need to learn. And anybody in the Oregon area, definitely look for State 3 farms in your local dispensary, because this is going to be one of your few chances to try something like this. So, and that brings me to, why we maybe don't see it as often. And it's just like, how does it grow? Like, is it a quick vegger? Is there a long flowering time? What is the cycle life like on the Acapulco Gold?
Well, it grows, typical of any other plant in veg. It clones fine. It grows fine. It will have these real thin leaves that are really long. But not a problem. The thing is in flower is this plant, being an equatorial sativa land race, it's going to triple in size at least. It almost just doesn't stop growing. And the flowering time is real. Why you're not going to see a true landrace sativa is because the flowering time on this is 12 weeks is really where we harvested at. That's 84 days, but it can easily go 90 days plus. And I think with that, I believe that long flowering time is really also where you get these really energizing and these euphoric effects of these sativas too, because when you see, you'll have it's like it doesn't stop growing, so it's still pushing out resin while it's also having degradation of other resin. And since legalization, we're starting to see more and more scientific studies, and they're showing that when you're seeing amber trichomes and then the bulbs burst and kind of fade away there, it's turning into the THC is actually degrading into CBN, so you're getting the more euphoric high of the clear resin glands, and then you're also getting the CBN of the degraded ones. And so I think you're getting this mixed thing. And this is, I would like to see a study about this, but that is my hypothesis of why we're getting this amazing feeling that's unmatched by any recent hybrid.
You just gave me a lot to think about. That makes absolute sense, but it's never been framed in that context for me before. So, wow. That is something to think about. And how is the trichome coverage on it? One of the things I noticed with some of the older strains is they're not frost monsters like some things we see today. But like you just said, it has no relation to the overall effect because the effects are there. But are they? How is the trichome coverage on something like this? Would it be considered a washer?
I haven't, because it takes so long to grow, and it's not, it's a low yielder in comparison to a modern day hybrid. I have not used it to wash. I haven't even run a test with it. It's just, it honestly, it's so sought out on the underground kind of thing. It's gone instantly. But I would like, that's a good experiment to do. But what we have is we have small trichome heads. It is what so we're growing these old school strains, and we're using modern technology like LEDs or CMHs mixed in with HPS, and doing techniques such as de-leafing at day 1 and day 21, and that seems to pull out, like, as you have the leaves growing out of your bud and you de-leaf that, there's a little bit of trichome coverage on those leaves, and it seems to pull it out a little bit more. I don't want to get too far into bro science. I know we all don't like that, but it seems to, when I started de-leafing it more, it seemed to pull more trichomes. And in doing a mixed light spectrum, having LEDs and HPS seems to have a better create more trichome coverage. I've been experimenting with sun-grown and HPS and LEDs, and I kind of went out in the Oregon legal market, and I was like, what is the best? The best. I know it's a hard term to define, but what is it? What do I like? And what are the people saying that is the best? And I kind of have landed on that, the light assisted greenhouse seems to be having a wider spectrum of cannabinoids. It seems to be having a wider spectrum of terpenes when tested, and it seems to be a really good product. So I'm excited too. I haven't done it yet, but I'm excited now. I built a greenhouse. It's taken me 2 years specifically so that I can run these long-running sativas using the sun, using LEDs and HPS for a full spectrum light, and see what we can really pull out of this plant. So I'm excited to do that.
I think you're onto the right recipe there, and especially for bringing out, like you said, some of these expressions from some of these more exotic things that we just don't see indoors because they were never conceptualized to be inside. So that mixed spectrum will be awesome. So what kind of bud structure do you get from like the Acapulco Gold? Is it golf balls, spears, massive colas? What can you expect from an Acapulco Gold plant?
Okay, so you're going to have a really, really tall, some people would describe it as stringy, I guess, but there's big buds on it. We do a living soil only, so I would imagine, I can't really speak on, liquid nutrients, but it's tall, and like I said, it's kind of stringy. And what you'll get is a pointy bud. It's going to kind of, it's going to be big buds, but it's going to kind of point out at the top. And you get these calyx stacks. I don't know if you've seen that ever, like sometimes like a tie. I've seen that a lot in the Thai strains and Thai crosses. You get this where it's almost just calyx stacks. It's like right at the very
string of pearls. Yep, like a string of pearls,
yes.
Like the Lester Greenspoon strain is one that I always reference when it comes to string of pearls. It's like so ugly yet so unique.
Exactly. And, and it comes down to, maybe that ugliness, but when you see it, I usually know that one's going to be like pretty good. It seems like, I don't know if it's because the trichome to leaf ratio is probably higher than it could ever possibly be in a bud, but those ones that do that little string of pearls thing, it seems to be amazing. Whenever I run these sativas that stack like that, I always take for my own personal head stash. I'll break some of those off and I'll roll them into a joint, and I'll share them with my friends, and those will be the ones. And people every time will be like, "What is that? Oh my gosh!" And I'm like, you it's never for sale, but that specific section, but the plant is. But yeah, it's something special, you know.
What kind of taste you briefly described the smell and the terpenes and kind of how they're maturing throughout the course of the grow. How about the taste in the finished flowers?
So the taste is it's really more complex than something that you get with, say, a something like a Skittles or a gelato. That's kind of like, it seems like more in a box, which is, it tastes really good. Like with the Acapulco Gold, what you get is the smell. First of all, is you have one of the most volatile terpenes, which is terpenoline, which is really synonymous with the landrace sativas. As you know very well, being a lover of the White Widow, you know, so you, at first thing, you're going to get that really, just, if you know that the old school sativas, it's going to hit you first with that terpenoline because it's evaporating more than anything. But deeper inside of it, when you break it up, you're going to get a piney flavor is going to kind of be after that, like lime and pine in there, which, you know, pinene will probably be responsible for that, and limonene or whatever. But and then behind that is even like another layer of just earthy peppery flavor, kind of like what you would have in a Skywalker OG or like Obama Kush, or even I've even tasted that in a little bit of like Oreos. You know, people say they don't like that Oreos strain that's out now, but you get that, you can this, it's got that hint of, it's earthy but still full flavor. So I don't know if that's kind of, I don't know, kind of over the place, but it's kind of in layers with the smell and then the smoke and then the finish.
Well, it's a good description because, again, that does go beyond the one-dimensional, boom, here it is in your face. And that's why some of these strains are so sought after, is that it's just complexity. And for the connoisseur, connoisseurs who can appreciate that, it's just like, dang, that just changed up on my taste buds. So
yeah, exactly. You know, and you actually sparked some thought. I really need to watch some of this, no matter how small. I got to see what this does in a hash situation.
Gosh, if the flower is as just like energetic and amazing as it is, a concentrated form would just kind of blow my mind. Again, the yields need to be there, but they do have the small little like sample, almost like shot glass washers. You can be like, okay, what is my percentage return gonna be? Maybe I'll wash it, maybe I won't. But again, just having that little head stash there would probably be kind of nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Cool. And before we go, are there any tips? So if someone was, lucky enough to get their hands on some of the original Acapulco Gold seeds, or if they were able to get a cut, do you have any tips on growing it? Do they need support or flower early? What kind of tips might you have for Acapulco Gold?
Yeah, I would say you're going to want to have, I don't use trellis. I use bamboo and kind of wrap around it, but you would want to have some sort of trellising or some sort of staking, because the really long and stringy, like I said, but the main piece of advice I would say when growing this or another equatorial sativa that's going to be stretching so much is flower it early, especially with us living soil guys. You know, if you're in a 30-gallon living soil pot or in beds, don't take this out to be a 3 or 4 foot plant, because you're going to run out of space if you're indoors. Like flower it. I mean, I believe I flower them at probably 1 foot, and they basically don't stop growing. It just never stops. And then, so then on top of that, while you're growing it, the ability to grow this plant and not have it just kind of eat everything up, you're going to want to have some top dresses and some nutrients, because 90 days is a long time to be in a flowering pot where even with living soil, where there's everything in there, you want to supplement with a top dress. My newest thing has been insect brass, which I could go off for days about. I'd love to talk about that at another time, but I put some insect brass, some worm castings, and then I will do a compost tea weekly. And then I will also use some of the inputs that we have for our living soil, such as fish bone meal, crab meal, some feather meal. Like a feather meal would be great. That's a slow release nitrogen. As it breaks down, it's going to still give you a little bit of nitrogen, and the bone meal is going to be slow release for a lot of phosphorus. So just having the nutrients available to break down to be available for that plant later is going to be really important, because if you lose that gusto, you're not at week 6 when you get that push. You're going to be more at week 7, 8, 9 when you're going to get that final push, and then a final one at the end at 90 days. And if you just don't have it there, they're not going to be able to give you that final
that final swelling, that push that we all wait for, that we all love, where we're like, yep, she's almost done. Yep. So great advice, man. And I appreciate you coming here and taking the time today to share a little bit about such a classic strain, Acapulco Gold. Again, that is in the book Higher, and I will put a link not only to this book, but also to your information, Jason, in the description, so everybody can give you a follow. But is there anywhere that you'd like people to be able to find you or learn a little bit more about State 3 Farms?
Oh, yeah, sure. Instagram, we're at state_3. And YouTube, we're going to be, I just started up a YouTube channel, so we're going to be State 3 TV on YouTube, and you can follow along. Instagram, we do the pretty pictures, and then the State 3 TV, we're kind of doing the legal stuff behind it and some of the pitfalls and struggles of the reality of a grower,
Well, they're good to put out there, and that is, a huge reason why I was attracted to your Instagram in the first place. Just, you talk about a lot of the important topics, especially for people who are trying to get into this industry, and you have the experience, and I appreciate your philosophy and approach. So everybody out there watching, definitely follow the Instagram. I'm going to go and subscribe to your YouTube when I'm done here. And then I'll copy the link and put it in the notes. But I do appreciate your time. Any parting words on the Acapulco Gold?
Oh, I don't know. Just uplifting, awesome, energizing. Let's keep those classics alive.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And everybody stay tuned. We got more coming up.
Thank you.
Sweet.
I really hope you all have enjoyed the show so far. And one thing I wanted to start adding to the seed collector shows is breeder tips, something to help you build a foundation for success. Because I know a lot of you out there want to start doing your own breeding. You want to start making seeds, you want to make crosses, you want to try to carry things in a certain direction. And that's awesome. It takes time, but it also takes a solid foundation. And that is what I want to start building today. And we're going to start with one of the most basic but important things, and that's talking about Gregor Mendel. Now, if you've ever taken like plant biology or just learned about breeding in general, the name Gregor Mendel has bound to come up early in the conversation. He is responsible for outlining the laws of inheritance, which he demonstrated in his groundbreaking experiment, Mendel's pea, from 1856 to 1865. It was like 10 years, 30,000 different peas. He grew out a whole bunch of peas. But anyways, you're asking yourself, why is this important? Through this experiment, we learned that the results can be predicted in offspring based on combinations of dominant and recessive genes in true breeding plants, or in our case, true breeding cannabis. Now, unfortunately for him, his findings didn't become accepted until well after his death. At the time that his paper came out and was published, the popular thought that was the offspring would be just a combination of the two parents. So, yellow and blue make green, blue and red make purple. That was the popular thought at the time. Mendel worked with 7 easily identifiable characteristics of pea plants: plant height, pod shape and color, seed shape and color, and flower position and color. Taking seed color as an example, Mendel showed that when true breeding yellow peas and true breeding green peas were crossbred, their offspring always produced yellow seeds. Now, true breeding plants are plants that always produce offspring that look like the parents. Modern cannabis has very few true breeding cultivars. Unexpected and varied traits in offspring can occur if the parents are not true breeding. But dominant and recessive principles still apply, and these combinations are just greater with modern cannabis. So, for his experiment, Mendel created hybrids, which involved mating two true breeding individuals that have different traits. He collected pollen from one variety and pollinated a second variety with it. Plants used in the first generation of crosses as the donor and receiver of pollen were labeled P for parental generation. The seeds produced from that were called F1 for the first filial generation. And Mendel examined the results of that F1 generation and then allowed some of the F1s to self-pollinate and create an F2 generation. Now, if P generation, F1, F2, S1, BX3, if all that labeling sounds foreign to you, don't worry. We're going to be covering that in an upcoming episode. Mendel's experiment extended beyond the F2 generation, but it was the ratio of characteristics in the P, the F1, and F2 generations that were the most intriguing and became the basis of Mendel's theory. By taking this experiment beyond the F1 generation, which would have only expressed the dominant genes, ratios of inheritance became possible to predict with true breeding plants through the identification of the dominant and recessive traits. Two dominant genes will express itself as the dominant trait. A dominant gene and a recessive gene will demonstrate itself as the dominant trait. But two recessive genes will display the recessive trait, which in this case is the white flower trait, which shows up again in the F2 population of the Mendel P experiment. All of these dominant and recessive combinations are easily visualized using a Punnett square, which is what we'll dive into on the next breeder tips. So this should get you curious to learn more and provides a basic framework for why we get the results that we do. I hope you guys enjoyed the whole show, not just this segment. Let me know in the comments. I appreciate you all watching and staying to the end. I hope you had fun. Let me know what you think, and you can continue to follow me, Chad Westport on YouTube right here. That's the channel. On Instagram, I am out there, chad.westport, and of course the website, chadwestport.com. So until the next time, everybody, remember to party on.